this target might look familiar. If you watched our last episode of Extreme Reloading, you'll recognize those 5 rounds. And those 5 rounds were my initial workup load for the 7.7 Arisaka rifle. Now I'm using Norma brass, CCI, large rifle bench rest primers, Hodgdon's 4350, all topped off with a Sierra 180 grain bullet. Now I'm shooting 5 more rounds today, and what I'm doing is I'm looking for optimal charge weight. I'm looking for what we call the sill. That is a point in this load workup where one round essentially has the exact same velocity as another round, the next subsequent round. In that area where the 2 rounds are essentially at the same muzzle velocity is what we call the sill, and we've just identified the optimal charge weight. Now I'm firing 45.0 all the way through 45.8 grains, and I'm incrementing my powder charges by only 0.2 of a grain. That's the technique that we use with optimal charge weight. Round number 3, muzzle velocity 2,114 feet per second. And I'm using this lab radar chronograph. It's relatively new for me. I've only had it for a number of months, but it seems to be working quite well. I still have my tried and trusted Ailer 33. Round number 4 has a muzzle velocity of 2,117 feet per second. And that looks like we've just established a sill. Only 3 feet per second difference between those 2 powder charges. So that means if I use 45.5 grains of Hodgdon 4350 in these Norma cases, I should see very consistent muzzle velocities. They're not going to be identical, of course, but they're going to be, pretty darn good. And round number 5, exit the muzzle at 2,158 feet per second. We've left that sill. And let's go back in now and take a look at these results on this episode of Extreme Reloading. Now that went just about as well as you could hope for. I don't know if you noticed, but those 5 rounds grouped pretty well. But I will note that I had to fire this group at 25 yards. So maybe not so impressive after all. But we did establish a very nice solid sill, and I'm going to be loading 45.5 grains in the future with this 180 grain Sierra bullets, and we're going to shoot for group in our next episode. And to make that kind of fun, I'm going to put my reloads up against Steinel ammo, and Steinel makes probably the best factory ammo in 7.7 Arisaka that I've seen. You know that we've had some problems with Norma USA in 7.7, and those primers were piercing, but that was not the case with Steinel. But here's my problem. My entire load workup has been using Norma brass. And one thing you have to realize about OCW, that optimal charge weight is really the optimal charge weight for that brass. If we suddenly change the brass to the PPU brass that's being used by Steinel, and I now have a box or so of empty brass from Steinel, well, that optimal charge weight setting of 45.5 grains almost certainly wouldn't hold up. So I spent a lot of time working up this load using Norma brass, and Norma brass is some really good stuff. I really like Norma brass. So my little conundrum now is that I'm getting kind of low on Norma brass. So I've still got about a half a box of Norma factory ammo. But I don't want to fire that in that rifle because of the piercing primers. And as I noted earlier, if you start piercing primers, pretty soon you're going to start modifying, wrecking that firing pin. And then you're going to pierce primers on any load that you fire in it. Even though what we saw is that the problem looks like it's with those primers that are in the Norma factory ammo. So I don't want to fire those. Okay, so simple solution is we pull the bullets, dump out the powder, all this good stuff like this. And in many, many cases, different types of ammo, I would just discard that brass. I'd say, who cares? That's not worth the hassle. And before I discarded that brass, though, I would kill the primer, fill the case with WD-40. It's a good way of doing that. And then I could safely discard that brass. But my problem is I like that Norma brass. And it's not easy to get any good 7.7 Arisaka brass. Or ammo, for that matter. So what I did is I pulled the bullets, dumped out the powder, and I filled those cases with WD-40. And I let it sit for about 5 days. Now my problem is I still need to get that primer out of the cases. And some folks, what they'll do is they'll deprime it on the reloading press just like you would spent primers. And what I've read is, and I haven't tried this, what I've read is that in some cases that primer will still ignite. I don't like that. I don't like that because I don't want anything causing some pressure inside my dies and my reloading press area. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to fire those things through the Arisaka rifle. But I've got a whole bunch of WD-40 in those cases now. I don't really want to shove that down the bore or anything like that. WD-40 is not a good oil, let's say, for a bore. It's not. So my next step then, to make it really nice and safe and to probably further kill the primers, is I put those cases in my ultrasonic cleaner and I clean them for about half an hour. Let them soak in there for about half an hour. And then I dried them out. Let them dry thoroughly, and then we went out to the range and just fired these 10 cases through the 7.7 Arisaka Type 99 rifle, and it worked really well. A little bit of a puff would go off. It wasn't full live primers. They were pretty dead. Some of them were absolutely dead. Some a little bit more live than others, but it worked really well. I now have 10 or so more Norma cases to move forward on the next set of loads. I then prepared those brass cases just like I did earlier, weighed them, and put them in the appropriate sorting for future use. Now, when we've been doing all this, I've spent some time on the internet and kind of bumped into a couple of very interesting 7.7 Arisaka websites. That got me to digging, got me to thinking, I would like to know a little bit more about the history of this rifle. So unraveling the history behind this rifle begins by studying the serial number. Now, like most firearms, the serial number is placed on the left side of the receiver of these Type 99 rifles. And the first thing that we want to look at is determining the manufacturer of this specific rifle. You see, there was numerous arsenals or weapons plants that were producing Type 99 rifles. And so what we do is we need to look at the symbol or the insignia all the way to the right on this rifle. And what we learn is that this rifle was built at Nagoya Arsenal. Now, as I understand it, Nagoya was one of the largest arsenals producing rifles for the Japanese military. It wasn't just one building or one plant. It was a number of plants in that city of Nagoya. Now, what I learned is that this specific arsenal had a period of operation from 1923 through the end of the war in 1945. Now, they weren't producing Type 99s this entire time. There were predecessors, of course, to the Type 99 that were being produced at this specific factory. So it's clear that Nagoya was the arsenal or the manufacturer of this rifle. Now we look all the way to the left of the serial number and we look for what's called the series markings. Now what I learned is that Nagoya Arsenal produced Type 99s from 1939 through the end of the war in 1945, beginning, obviously, with Series 1. And each series constituted 100,000 rifles. So the serial number then following the series number should be ranging from 0 through 99,999. This serial number is 43,183. And that series marking is series number 5. Series number 5 is, less than halfway through all of the manufacturing done by this particular arsenal, as they ended up producing Series 12 Type 99 rifles just at the end of the war and did not finish the whole series. In fact, they only built about 1,000 of those Series 12, and that would have been getting to the last-ditch type of rifles. Now, the next question is, when were these Series 5 Nagoya rifles built? And this is not going to be quite so easy or concrete of an answer. And while we have the serial number, the series mark, and the manufacturing mark, we don't have a year associated with those directly. However, what we do know is that Nagoya Arsenal produced Type 99 rifles from 1939 to 1945. And during that roughly 7-year time span, they produced 12 series of rifles. Each of those series, more or less, was 100,000 rifles. Now, if they had produced those in a linear fashion, meaning the same number of rifles were produced each year, and we already know that that's not really true, then this rifle that we're talking about today, this particular rifle, would have been built in 1941. Now, one of the references that I saw on this question of when were these different series of rifles produced comes back or points back to Voigt. And Voigt suggests that the Series 5 rifles were produced in the summer of 1943. Other things that I've read indicate that that might be the latest date for a Series 5 rifle. Notice that the chart suggests that Nagoya rifles were started in 1941, but other records from Honeycutt suggest that these same rifles started production in 1939. So I think we can use the suggestion by Voigt as a late-term suggestion for this particular rifle and Series 5 rifles in general. So we've likely gone as far as we possibly can to discover the history of this particular old Type 99 rifle. In our next episode of Extreme Reloading, we're going to take this 7.7 Arisaka rifle back out to the range and shoot for group. And we're going to put it up against Steinel ammo, factory ammo. This is some real good stuff. Now my concern is, am I going to be able to beat Steinel ammo, or is this going to be the first instance where factory ammo beats my reloads? You're not going to want to miss that episode or any of our other episodes of Extreme Reloading. Thanks for watching. Fred Honeycutt's book is actually still available through Amazon.com, where I got my copy. And this was an absolute wealth of information to allow me to really dig in and figure out this rifle's history. There's all these nuances about these rifles to really help you understand where they came from, figure out when they were built much, much better. And this particular rifle really seems to be intact from its original manufacture. All these little pieces of information indicating how this rifle was actually built straight from the factory. And everything here is indicating that this is early production Type 99. It was Series 5, but early Series 5. And again, probably 1941 to 1943 was the manufacturing date of this particular rifle. And the amazing thing is, here we have an 80-year-old rifle that still shoots, and actually shoots pretty darn well. Now here's something interesting. This bolt has matching serial number to the rifle itself.